I have a secret for you, whispered my mother's kahuna, her Hawaiian medicine woman. It was the full moon, and the tide was out as they descended into the sea cave. And from inside the cave, my mother and the kahuna could see the full moon in Aries hanging over the ocean, glittering across a black sea. My mother had recently discovered that she was pregnant before her visit to the island of Maui, and she wasn't yet decided whether or not she was ready or even felt called to the radical life-changing responsibility of bringing life into this world. But there, in that cave, and under the glow of the pregnant moon, the two women entered into ceremony. The kahuna had prepared the space beforehand and placed rockets in the cave. And without my mother's knowledge, she lit the fireworks hidden at her side, and they suddenly exploded over the ocean. And she cried, "This is your child." And in that moment of awe and surprise, my mother felt the soul of her child enter into her body. It felt as though my spirit simultaneously came from the heavens and the sea and into her womb. She surrendered right then, and she was going to become a mother. She was going to have a baby. By looking at my mother's natal chart and the astrological transits that occurred on the date of the cave ceremony, we have access to deep layers of archetypal influences and meanings at play. As you can see, transiting Pluto is conjunct my mother's natal Venus-Saturn conjunction. The interplay of Venus and Pluto manifested as a beautiful and transformational love coming from the interior depths of the womb and the elemental forces of the cosmos. My mother was raptured with the environment, the moon, the sea, the cave. That is a womb-like natural feature forged by the very plutonic Hawaiian goddess Pele, through the fury of lava and the erosion of Saturnian time. The intensity of Pluto can fuel Saturn's capacity to focus one's will to a hard labor, such as that of birth or motherhood. And Saturn-Pluto forges enduring structures and fosters a deeper sense of maturity and authority. But on the other hand, Saturn-Pluto can also bring about a feeling of being caught in the grip of impersonal, larger forces controlling one's life, weighty events that have enduring effects, which are all aspects inherent with becoming a parent and the responsibility of bringing life into the world. A great sense of maturity comes with the primordial act of reproduction. Empowered by the plutonic forces, the Venus-Saturn dynamic manifested itself in my mother's faithfulness to motherhood. The self-sacrifice. This is what you get when you try new technology. I just wanted to be wild and free with my hands. So it really brings the softness Venus does to the Saturn-Pluto complex, bringing this nourishing experience of love despite the obstacles of fear in losing her independence, of death, inadequacy, or financial strain. And the Venus-Saturn-Pluto complex is expressive of deep and enduring love. Surely the love that manifested that night in the sea cave and still stands strong today. And Pluto is also an aspect to my mother's natal moon, forming a trine So the moon is representative of the maternal in combination with the plutonic, evokes this intense capacity to care and to nurture. And it catalyzed these deep maternal instincts. Additionally, we have transiting Saturn, sextile to my mother's natal Venus Saturn. And it really complements the Pluto moon transit by solidifying the long term relationship between mother and daughter, which subsequently developed greater maturity within my mom. And Saturn, in aspect to itself, is indicative of the beginning of a new stage of life and yet the ending of another, which developed quite radically because my mom hadn't been planning to get pregnant and she wasn't convinced that she ever wanted to have a child. So her inner and outer world was met with complete upheaval. Here, transiting Uranus is squaring her natal Mars. It's reflected in the literal exterior wild explosions of the fireworks, but also this disruptive internal event of becoming pregnant. Mars empowered the Uranian breakthrough of my mother, connecting her to her novel incarnation as a parent. And contrastingly, the softer energy of transiting Venus is sextile to her natal Uranus. Although my mother was entering into a period of heightened responsibility and maturity, she found freedom through love, through creating living art with the cosmos. So 23 years later, on the island of Maui, I discovered a sea cave. And the hair on the nape of my neck rose. It just had to be the same cave where my mother and her kahuna performed their ceremony. Guided by intuition, I began to prepare. I swam across a lagoon to a little island where I collected 7 smooth stones. I asked the hala trees for their blessings and leaves before I stuffed them into the side of my bikini and swam across the lagoon with the stones. Not an easy task. And I wove leis into necklaces, bracelets, ankles, and a crown. And the day of the November full moon, I started my menses. I anointed each of the 7 stones with my menstrual blood, and I energetically connected them to the 7 chakras, and I wrapped them each with a hollow leaf. And that night, I entered into the cave. I smudged the space, and I lined the perimeter with flowers and candles. And sitting in the center, I dropped into meditation. The moon rose over the ocean, and the moonlight shimmered across the onyx water. And I felt as though a current began moving through me, a rhythm that brought me to my feet. And I began to dance a circle around the cave, singing songs I didn't know I knew. I watched my shadow flickering on the cave walls, and I felt myself shapeshift into a coyote, deer, and hawk. And in an expanded state of consciousness, time dropped away. And there I was, with my mother in the same cave, in the same space, separated only by the veil of time. Time's linearity is but an illusion. And if linear time is an illusion, then my mother really did feel me there in that cave so many years ago. She felt my soul because my soul was not only inside her womb, but also sharing the same ceremonial space, separated only by the temporal perspective of 23 years. I felt an overwhelming closeness and a sense of gratitude for my mother. It felt like fate. I've always had a challenging experience reconciling living in a physical human form. But there we were. I was meant to be my mother's child. Reflective, complementary archetypal influences are at work through this cross-generational ceremony. While my mother had transiting Pluto conjunct her Venus Saturn and Pluto trine Moon, I experienced transiting Venus Pluto opposite my natal moon Venus. Our experiences reflect one another in the beautiful and transformational love infused with elemental intensity. And the moon in the archetypal complex holds the maternal combined with the plutonic depths that represent not only my mother, but the powerful archetypal mother within the cave and within the landscape. My mother was pregnant and I was menstruating. The fierce and life-giving plutonic goddess was there. And Pluto moon plunged us both into a profound generational connection. And I additionally found myself in realms beyond my human ancestors, where I identified myself with the forms of animals. And while my mother had transiting Venus sextile to natal Uranus, I have Venus, Pluto conjunct my natal Uranus, Neptune. And here we see Venus, Uranus, and Venus, Uranus, paralleling the unexpected awakening of new dimensions. And the imaginal and transcendent dimensions of Neptune are important to note here because of the quality of consciousness that was activated during my ceremony. By plunging into the Plutonian primal, I connected to my mother and her pregnancy ceremony, Neptune. I reached into the intangible, the timeless, and the infinite. And so there's this mythic quality that surrounds the story, imbued with Venus, Neptune, mystical love, a love that merges and colors the powerful, expanded state of consciousness and dissolved the boundaries separating souls by linear time. Through the collaborative forces of Venus, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, my embodied vision of reality was transfigured. Through the portal of the cave, I journeyed deeper into the soul of the world. And there I found a confluence of spiritual heights and evolutionary energies, Neptune and Pluto in divine union. My mother was initiated into maturity by Pluto transiting her Venus Saturn and transiting Saturn sextile natal Saturn. So in this context, the Senex appears as a constructive and necessary life-shaping element. The quality of the Senex is in balance with the unexpected youthful Uranian upheaval of being with child. And we were both liberated by Uranus. My mother from her fear and hesitancy toward motherhood, and me from my limited perspective of linear time, awakened to the depth of our karmic relationship. The polar opposites of the Senex and Puer come together to illustrate the beautiful dynamic between maturity and the fruit of maturity and youthful freedom. And while my mother was asked to step into the responsibility of the Senex, I was called to embrace being her child and being comfortable being in a human incarnation. And transiting Uranus created a T-square with my natal moon Venus and Uranus Neptune. And the archetypal complex suddenly manifested itself as a new cosmic horizon to the multidimensional nature of reality. The love of my mom became a doorway into an embodied mystical union. The two ceremonies in themselves hold so much power and beauty. And with the additional dimension provided by the archetypal lens, we can see more clearly the profound interconnected creativity of the cosmos. This tale is ultimately an embodied creation myth, a myth where being with child is a sacred ceremony between mother and child, the elemental forces of nature. The two full moons supported and illuminated the transformative intersection of the Plutonic primal and the depths and Neptunian celestial heights. The harmonious interplay of the Senex and Puer, liberation and responsibility, and the power of love to transcend our limited perspectives, to reach beyond time and space and individuality, creating enduring bonds that permeate into the landscape itself. Thank you.